What MLS wants is something, again, that looks like minor league baseball, that has teams in a bunch of different cities that are not MLS cities. And for all of this to be building a pyramid that is inside MLS and makes it harder, makes the moat harder for groups like USL that have a similar business model to try to do that. And KKR really does believe, it seems like from talking to folks there, that there is in aggregate some commercial opportunity that is being untapped if they start selling all these things together.
Brand new chapter of the Soccer Wars has exploded here, and to talk about what's next for MLS Next Pro and the battle with USL, seemingly, I would like to welcome in the deputy editor at Sportico, Eben, Novy-Williams. Welcome to Morning Kickaround, sir.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Good to see you, Eben. I think it's been a while since you and I have chatted, but this is certainly a big deal in American sports, soccer landscape, obviously, money coming in. So, you know, I've tried to process some of the details here. I've read obviously the MLS presentation, the release rather on it. I've actually even seen, not all of it, a conversation that Tom Glick had with our friends at the Soccer Business. What's the upshot here? Why is private equity jumping into bed with MLS Next Pro?
Yeah, I think the framing of you mentioned the USL, Robert, I think is right. I think MLS, when they launched Next Pro in 2022, had this vision of this becoming basically what minor league baseball has been for Major League Baseball. And I think in the first 4 years that there are some success stories. They have produced some players that are playing in MLS and elsewhere, but I don't think the teams bought into this economically in the way that I think MLS wanted them to. And there are some exceptions there. I think what Nashville has done in Huntsville is the thing that MLS wants. And there are a number of other teams, as you guys know, that did not dedicate a ton of resources to these Next Pro teams. They weren't playing in unique places. They were really just thinking about this as a sporting side development sunk cost. And what MLS wants is something, again, that looks like minor league baseball, that has teams in a bunch of different cities that are not MLS cities. And for all of this to be building a pyramid that is inside MLS and makes it harder, makes the moat harder for groups like USL that have a similar business model to try to do that. And KKR really does believe, it seems like from talking to folks there, that there is in aggregate some commercial opportunity that is being untapped if they start selling all these things together.
Yeah, this is, I think, conspiracy theorists, soccer conspiracy theorists have always thought that MLS wants to own the sport of soccer vis-a-vis like how Major League Baseball does. And so is that this is seemingly a step towards that. So all the big cities are mostly, filled with MLS sides. So it's like literally the next progression of like kind of the capitalistic approach to sport is to go to the places that you're not already occupying in your first tier brand.
I think that's right. I think MLS is very aware that the structure of professional soccer in the U.S. is different than the structure of professional soccer in basically every other country in the world. And because of that different structure, it gives them the ability to what you said, basically try to control the entire pyramid of pro soccer here in the US. And yeah, I think that you're going to see a lot of these teams rebrand and move to different places. And in my mind, what this is really signifying, what MLS wants is they want outside investors to buy into Next Pro. And there are 2 or 3 or 4, there's a small handful of independent teams in Next Pro right now. You're not going to have anytime soon, I don't think, MLS teams that own multiple Next Pro teams. But if you want to build a network of 40, 50, 60 Next Pro clubs around the world, or around the country, you need outside investors to come in. And this is something that Don Garber told me, and he's right. Having KKR as the partner there in those worlds for people who want to own a mid-tier soccer team in a mid-tier city in the US, having KKR as a partner is an attractive proposition. So I think part of this, in addition to bringing more money into Next Pro, is also trying to make this league more attractive for outside investors who might want to own a team in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, or in Boise, Idaho.
Now, see, both those places have teams, Evan, which is the problem,
and
right?
this is the challenge, right? Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so that part of it for the fans who, for those of us who are veterans of the soccer wars of USL versus NASL, and obviously MLS has had a role in that on some level. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that MLS moved into San Diego and a team died, and we had people, who care about lower division soccer screaming about that. St. Louis, I had people saying, where's U.S. soccer in preventing a team from coming to St. Louis under the MLS banner when there's already a team there? And obviously that's not how any of this works, right? This is ultimately a free-for-all.
And I think the ideal dream, Don Garber would never say this, the ideal dream is for USL teams to want to get into Next Pro instead, right? That's the dream. And you guys would know way better than me that there's a lot of bad blood there. That seems unlikely, at least in the near to medium term. But yes, I think that a lot of what MLS has done over the past 10 years at lower levels is, again, trying to create this pyramid that is entirely under its own name, under its own branding, under its own control, and trying to make the barrier to entry just harder and harder for anyone out there who has a professional team in a different league, trying to make that moat even wider.
Yeah, adding competition for those medium or tertiary size cities already makes a difficult job harder for USL and others that are trying to break into that space. What's your read on it? Does this seem like a long-term plan that's finally like, this is like the big chess piece, or is this like adjusting to the times that we're in?
Yeah, I think it's a long-term plan. I mean, you guys know that private equity is not a business that likes to hold entities for forever, right? I think this is long-term, maybe depending on how you define long-term. KKR does not. I don't think KKR wants to hold these teams for 20 or 30 years. What I think they want to do is kind of build the commercial structure, get proof of concept, try to get more teams into this league, and then see if there's someone else that wants to take over after them. But from the MLS perspective, yes, I think it's definitely long-term. I think they look at this as Next Pro 2.0, right? To use the parlance that Don has used about MLS 3.0. Yeah, this is 2.0. And I think they would say that they're not convinced that MLS Next Pro has had a fair shake in cities around the country where with money behind it. And this is an opportunity to do that.
Oh, you mentioned a couple of independent teams rather. And we talked to the president of one of them on Monday, and Darius Barnes in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That effort is backed by the DeVos family. They obviously have significant resources, and there's always a discussion among our listeners and our fan base here, I mean, American soccer fans that are maybe not MLS first kind of soccer fans. Why would you choose MLS Next Pro and its sort of minor league vibe over the independence of USL? But is that even is that even the right way to look at this? Obviously, MLS Next Pro also pitches itself as a lower cost alternative for some of these investment groups.
So what was his read? Was his read that, I mean, his team, I know, is not part of the KKR commercial engine here, but was his read that this was good for him, for his business?
Yeah, I mean, I think Darius said, this kind of investment can only help grow soccer. Now, he also comes from having worked for Crown Legacy in North Carolina, which is the MLS Next Pro outfit for Charlotte FC, and he played in MLS for a very long time. So I think he's very, his perspective is very from that top-down, big corporate entity kind of vibe. And there are people who, while USL rather is absolutely its own corporation and operates in its own interest as that, they have been able to sell people that their brand is more organic, more connected to the fans of their cities.
And that's exactly part of what this deal is, right? It's trying to make people like him think about Next Pro more professionally, as a safer place, as a place where there is maybe more long-term upside growth, so that more people, as they make that same debate that you're talking about, Jason, about, are we interested in USL and the freedom there? Are we interested in MLS Next Pro and the IP and the backing, and now the financial heft of one of the biggest private equity firms in the country, trying to think about that calculus and tilt the scales even incrementally further towards MLS Next Pro.
And KKR itself, and they created this thing called the Hometown Holdings. I want to ask how vast is this pool of money? Because on that same podcast we referenced earlier, Tom Glick, one of the leaders of this, is talking about potentially moving into 150 markets. And that's an incredible scale. So like, is this just one piece of a lot of money, or is this KKR outfit just like have a bazillion dollars and they can fund stadiums in these many places?
they have a lot of money. My understanding of the deal structure here is that it's over a period. I think it's a 5-year period. I think a lot of the economics at the start are going to depend on how many MLS teams choose to kind of opt into this umbrella. And I've heard some differing numbers on that. It seems like everyone at the league expects that a majority of them will, and whether that's 14 teams or whether that's 22 teams, I think it remains to be seen. But I don't think they would have done this without an understanding that a majority of the MLS controlled MLS Next Pro teams are going to choose to be in this. And then the more that I think opt in, the more money that KKR is going to commit to this. And then, Robert, I think longer term, the more that if they see success, there's going to be more money behind it. Right. So I think this is going to be a sliding scale of economic investment that starts with just these teams, these MLS teams that are opting in, and then they're going to try to get more MLS teams into, and then they're going to see if they can grow this thing to. I hadn't seen that number from Tom Glick. That's a very that's an optimistic an optimistic number, but I think it shows the way they think about the best case scenario here.
He said they have identified 150 locales, cities, whatever markets is probably the word he used, that could support professional soccer teams. I don't know that means they're going to try to put teams in 150 markets, although Ali Curtis recently said from the 30 or whatever they are, I don't think DC United has an operating team, so whatever they are, with a couple independent teams are above 30, that they wanted to get to 50 within the next couple of years, right? That would obviously take, and maybe this was that the KKR investment was bubbling at the time that Ali Curtis said that to Simon Evans, and this is now the fruition of that, and they're going to use this push to get into those markets. Now, at the risk of being overly cynical and completely reductive, Eben, you know, it feels like this is in part and parcel of the same kind of thing that Bell Tower and the other private equity with USL was doing, and ultimately this comes down to a real estate play. Like, we get to put a team in the town and sell the town on building a soccer stadium, and by the way, give us some land relatively cheap, and we'll build some apartments and some some commercial districts as well.
Yeah, I think that's partially true. I'd love to know how many of those cities on Tom's list have professional teams of some sort already in them. It would be fun to see the overlap there. And you're right. Yeah, the real estate aspect has been part of the reason why a lot of MLS clubs have chosen not to dedicate a lot of money to their Next Pro teams. It's just easier to have them in the same training facility and playing in front of a very small amount of fans in a much bigger stadium. Those stadiums, depending on where you are and depending on what the local municipality is, probably are not massive upfront costs. If you want to build a 4,000 seat kind of fairly bare bones soccer venue in a mid-sized American city, and particularly if you can get some local money behind it, not a huge upfront cost. But I think you're right. I think the real estate is a key piece of this. We're seeing this in Vancouver right now with the MLS team, right? You can't sell or think about a sports investment in America right now without also thinking about who owns the stadium, what the lease looks like, what the economics look like, what's around the stadium in terms of mixed use development, what you can put around there, what you can control. So yes, I think real estate is a central part of this conversation, just like it has been for minor league baseball and all the changes that have undergone there.
I find it interesting that we're talking about stadium booms and expansion, and all that costs a lot of money, right? And we're not exactly in the most robust and low cost to build things sort of economy right now. So I'm kind of curious how all this like infrastructure development clashes with the current economic environment.
It's hard. Yeah. Stadium construction costs have gone up a massive amount in the last 5 or 6 years. That started with COVID and supply chain challenges associated with that, and now the what's going on in the Middle East right now, the rising cost of fuel has strained all of these budgets. So it's definitely a factor. Another factor in here is that the way municipalities approach the idea of public money for stadiums is also changing. And at the top tier, that has not stopped Tennessee from giving the Tennessee Titans hundreds of millions of dollars. It did not stop public money, almost $1 billion for the Buffalo NFL Stadium. At the top level, we haven't yet seen drastic changes, I don't think quite yet. But yes, I think increasingly the way that a lot of politicians and local voters feel about the idea of subsidized sports stadiums is changing. And I could definitely see an argument where that becomes a change that is harder felt at smaller sized cities and smaller venues than what you're seeing with teams that have the economic heft that the NFL teams have.
All right, so private equity money into MLS Next Pro. We obviously know that's a factor in the USL push as well. And something we talked about on Friday on our show, in addition to the MLS Next Pro news, Evan, was that kind of surreptitiously, or at least without telling anybody they had done it, U.S. Soccer adjusted their professional league standard requirements to reduce the primary controlling stake needed to run a professional team from 35% to 15%. That, I don't know if you were aware of that.
I wasn't aware of that, but that's interesting. Yeah.
It was the same level, 35% for all three of the divisions I think they sanctioned. But obviously we're applying this really to the second division, I guess. I mean, there are some, obviously this is the way American soccer works. Divisions are kind of meaningless up to a point, but that 35% required a certain net worth and those kind of things. Dropping it to 15%, and I know I'm throwing this at you here on the fly, but do you think that has anything to do with private equity's investment in lower division soccer? If U.S. Soccer is now saying you don't have to have an owner with a 35% stake, you can spread it around a little bit more.
It certainly may. We've seen this kind of dynamic happen in the biggest leagues in the world. The NFL, the NBA are constantly thinking about their ownership rules, and one of them being how much does the control owner need to have down as a way of making it more enticing and easier to purchase these teams. If anyone is looking to sell new soccer franchises, which it seems like MLS Next Pro is, yes, it seems like a change like that would make it a little bit easier. What that does is it opens the door for bigger consortiums of people. It opens the door for people that, as you said, Jason, have smaller net worths. It opens the door for a potentially much larger institutional piece of the ownership group, like private equity, if that's what you're looking for. So that applies to Next Pro and also USL and basically the entire pro soccer.
All the whole levels, it went from 35 to 15.
Yeah, so I think that does make a big difference. I think particularly probably for Next Pro, if indeed their plan here is to tell investors in cities across the country that they are open for business, they are open for expansion. If you would like to own an independent Next Pro team, come on in and join KKR and join MLS and join everybody else. Then yes, having a shift like that where the upfront capital, maybe there's debt limits that have changed as part of that transition as well. But having limited upfront capital and being able to have a bigger group of people only makes that investment easier to put together from a financing standpoint.
That's interesting. They kind of gather together, almost form momentum of leverage of resources. And my next question.
I've got a question actually quickly for you guys, because I'm curious how you guys think about the timing of this relative to the World Cup. I mean, obviously the MLS and their owners have held the World Cup up in front of as golden in front of the windshield, and now we're getting closer to it. The fact that the Whitecaps are having this much trouble getting a transaction done, I don't think is necessarily doesn't look good for the way that the investor community is thinking about Major League Soccer right now. But I'm curious how you guys think about getting this done before basically the entire soccer ecosystem comes to America for 3 weeks this summer.
Man, I don't really have a handle on that. I mean, I think it's really hard for us to get a sense of what the World Cup is going to do, because so much of the news around it, at least if you are very tuned in as a soccer fan, has been negative, right? It's just in the last day or two, the hotel industry saying we're not seeing any bump. What are you talking about? Nobody's, this is actually worse.
Ticket process has been a disaster. Yeah.
Ticket process has been a disaster. There are, I'm seeing stories about, Argentina fans saying we're going to have to sleep 10 to a room in order to make this worth it for us to go to the World Cup. And so, I don't know if that's ultimately a drain on sort of domestic soccer prospects. I think, talking to you is informative because it only reinforces my belief that a lot of this is happening in spite of soccer, but not necessarily because of it. I mean, when I wrote about the private equity coming into MLS Next Pro, I pointed out that we are at a moment, sort of regardless of the World Cup, where soccer is just a thing Americans do now. Like I don't mean to say that it's like exploded and it's gonna. I don't know that part, but it has been sort of rolled into the general sports sort of package that Americans involve themselves in. We just sort of accept that it's part of it, even if you don't like it. It's there and it doesn't offend you. So now this is an opportunity. There aren't any other opportunities, right? There really aren't any other. I mean, minor league baseball has sort of either been maxed out or already taken over by private equity in that regard. So where is the growth? Unless you're going to go with one of the strange new concept sports, Eben, like slam ball or something, like what are you investing in from and sports have this unique element. You certainly know this, where it's not just a business consumer relationship. There are emotions involved and heartstrings can be pulled. And FIFA is doing this now. They're leveraging, as all these fans from Argentina and everywhere else are saying, they're leveraging the passion to extract as much money and capital as possible. And that's what private equity is seeing in my mind.
Yeah, I have this kind of, my concern for MLS is that the World Cup happens and the U.S. team gets out of the group stage and then gets eliminated at some point in kind of the mid knockout rounds. And there's a little bit of a bump there. And then the World Cup's over. And then everything that a lot of MLS owners and executives have been talking about the World Cup suddenly it's in the rearview mirror all of a sudden. And then it's a more sobering look at, okay, what are we now? Right. The World Cup is over. We can't point to that in the future. There is obviously there is support for soccer. Soccer is a very popular sport here in the US, but what is the future? What does the next 5 years look like? It was telling to me that the Whitecaps went on the market before the World Cup. Because I think that the general thinking would have been, if you expect the World Cup to be this kind of panacea and second rebirth of professional soccer or soccer in America, that when better to sell a team than right after that. And the Earthquakes have been looking for a buyer for a while as well. There's opportunity for investors who want to get into MLS right now. And it just doesn't seem like at the prices that owners are currently talking, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest there. So one of the things we're going to be focusing on a lot, I think, is the minute the World Cup is over, a more honest assessment of what MLS is and what professional soccer is in America is going to be able to take place in a way that it's hard right now with this just kind of huge event kind of looming in the next few months.
Yeah, that's a good point. With we hear the reports of the team valuations in MLS being huge and whatnot, and I wonder how much of that is like because World Cup.
Yeah, it's definitely baked in. So I think in our latest numbers, I believe we had 3 teams worth over $1 billion. So yeah, if you look at the growth lines, it's been trajectory just like that. It's been steadily upward, fairly consistently for the last few years. At the bottom of those tables, so with teams like the Whitecaps and like Montreal, we've started to see year-over-year drops in our numbers, which I don't think we have ever seen in any other sports league in the U.S. I think basically every league goes up in some capacity every year, every team. And for the first time, really, the last few years, I think we've seen some MLS teams whose valuations go down. And I'd be really fascinated. I don't do those numbers. My colleague Kurt does, but I'm going to be fascinated to see what those look like next year. Right. Again, when the World Cup is over and all of that is already baked into pricing. We'll see what the market and Vancouver and the Earthquakes are 2 examples of we're going to get a sense of what the market values these things at.
Yeah, I mean, I think, lots of fans who are not inclined to like MLS say the whole thing smacks of a pyramid scheme. We've heard that before, right? You're bringing in new owners at higher levels to pay back older owners, longer standing owners for their investment. And look, obviously that there's something to that because of the way MLS operates as a single entity league. But I guess the sense was always, again, this is more about scarcity than anything else. Right? There are only so many sort of major professional sports franchises that you can get your hands on if you have the wherewithal to go buy one. Major League Soccer has some. Maybe that drives up price because every time you guys do your valuations, Eben, I'm looking at those numbers and I'm seeing that the revenues, LAFC is valued the same as Inter Milan, champions of Italy, and I see that the revenue is decidedly different, right?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number in front of me, but basically every MLS team is among the 50 most valuable soccer teams in the world, right? And I think for most soccer fans globally would be shocked by that, right? And there's a lot of things at play here, including primarily the lack of promotion and relegation, which eliminates a lot of downside concern for MLS teams. There's also a salary cap, right? There's cost certainty, which is something that rich people love to have when they buy teams. It's the thing that is just shocking about what's happening at Chelsea right now and some other teams is you see the amount of money they're spending and the year-over-year losses that they're accruing, and MLS teams, a number of them lose money, obviously, but the money they lose is capped in a very real way because of the structure of the league. So yeah, I think that the valuation numbers definitely shock a lot of fans.
Right. And they will point to that. Don Garver will point to that and say, look at our valuations. We're doing everything right. And then the fans will say, yes, but there's obviously a ceiling on how good the league can be as long as you continue to treat it as a cost control exercise to generate equity for your current ownership.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always say that I find so interesting about MLS is, and you hit on it there, is some of these MLS owners got into this league for basically nothing. They paid maybe not even $1 million for their teams. And then you have other groups like in San Diego who paid $500 million to get into Major League Soccer. And those two people look at this league and what it costs to grow it and what the long-term value is in very different ways. And it's one of the challenges that Don has. It's one of the challenges that the league has, is that the vast spread of what people bought into this league for really does change their thinking on what the league should look like moving forward. And if you contrast that with NWSL, where basically every single owner is a new owner in the past 4 years, you have a different group of owners there who have all spent a lot of money and have a different expectation of what this league needs to do to get to a point where it's kicking off money. And I think and I don't see that changing necessarily right now in MLS, because I don't see some of those longer tenured owners selling anytime soon, but it does create a very interesting difference where some owners spend a lot of money and need to try to figure out a way to get that money back. And a lot of other owners spent so little money and their teams are worth so much money now that even year over year losses are not the end of the world.
Wow, you've given us a lot to think about here in this conversation, Eben. Really thank you for kind of sharing your knowledge and the great conversation here. Tell the audience where they can find your work if they're not already following.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm deputy editor of Sportico. So Sportico.com, we publish annual MLS valuations and NWSL valuations, et cetera. We break a lot of news on team sales. I'm spending a lot of time right now calling about Vancouver and other cities around the country, trying to figure out what's real and what isn't about long-term future of that team. And then I'm on Twitter at Novy_Williams, where I'm tweeting out my stuff and also giving some musings as well.
I'm sorry. I know we got to let Eben go. We're up against it with our timing as well. But since it came up and you mentioned Vancouver, and the word was out last week that there was a bidder from Vegas for the club. I believe it is, I think, Grant Gustafson. Yeah. Gustafson. I can't find much. I mean, I'm not a journalist the way you are, Eben. I can't seem to find much on Grant. I know he's got some family money. Do you know anything about Grant?
Yeah, I had the same reaction you did, Jason, when I heard his name last week. I went to Google immediately, and there's very little about Grant Gustafson himself. His family, as you said, there's a lot of money there. His mother, Tammy Gustafson, is one of the richest women in the country. They are heirs to Public Storage, that fortune, and they have a very successful horse breeding farm in Kentucky. So there's definitely family money there. I don't know much about Grant, and I will say that, and again, I'm happy to be proven wrong here. It's pretty rare for someone to step forward to want to buy a team in the major Big Five US leagues and not to have a very proven and documented public track record financially. My understanding is that they've been involved. The Gustafsons have been involved in this process for a while. They are the main group that the Vancouver Whitecaps owners have talked to about Vegas. That doesn't mean that someone else couldn't pop up at some point. I know there's been interest from groups in some other cities. I hear Phoenix mentioned a lot. I hear Indianapolis mentioned a little bit. I think one of the calculus for Major League Soccer here is that if you let this team move to Vegas, you're taking a very lucrative city off the board for potential future expansion, right? And if we saw San Diego paid $500 million, Don obviously believes that a standalone expansion team that would join in Las Vegas would have to pay a lot more than that. So you have this challenge now of you can buy the team in Vancouver and then pay hundreds of millions of dollars to figure out its stadium situation, or you can buy the team in Vancouver to move it, in which case I imagine MLS will charge you hundreds of millions of dollars to relocate the team. And maybe that gets you to a city that is maybe more lucrative or has better economics or better options. But thinking about what's going to happen there from the lens of what it's going to cost to keep the team and what it's going to cost to move the team. And then secondarily, wherever it moves is a city that will not pay a full price expansion fee in the future for its own team. Creates a kind of interesting dense web of economic considerations, both for Don and for the owners of the Whitecaps themselves.
We've given us a lot of food for thought, and I've unfortunately put an uneasy feeling in my tummy about AAA soccer coming to the United States, and then the business model for MLS being maybe better in the eyes of ownership overseas, and what the future of ProRel is. The future of ProRel more likely to come to the United States, or is closed systems more likely to come to Europe? Kind of like sneaks in the back of my head, but can't wait to have you back on. At the very latest, we'll get you on after the World Cup, and we'll talk about that perspective about where is MLS without being able to sell on the prospect of the FIFA World Cup boom. Thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Kickaround.
This was fun, guys. Thanks for having me.